What's up guys? This week's Ask Elvis is going to be slightly different because I'm on the road. We're doing it a little bit earlier, but I'm going to take you guys on this journey down to the southern tip of Spain where I'm going to a racetrack with BMW over the next couple of days to make a film about a couple of special cars. On the way, I'm going to be answering some of your questions. Given that I'm here for BMW, you might think that I'll be cruising my way through the country in something fancy like a nice 5 Series, 7 Series, maybe an i8. No, today I'm in a hire car which is an Opel Crossland X. But going through some pretty spectacular scenery on the way. Right, well, arrived at my destination after a pretty epic drive through some amazing scenery. I wish I could have shown you more of it because I'm sure that the camera just does not do it justice. It was amazing. Anyway, I'm here now. I've got to go and find my hotel, which apparently is just around the corner. But let's answer the first question. Let's get a quick one out of the way because Small Egg says, what's your favourite track and your favourite era of F1 and why? So, favourite track. I mean, it's quite difficult. It's a more difficult question than it looks because I actually thought of it, looked at it first, thought there's a quick and easy one, I'll get that out of the way, but the reality is it's actually quite hard to answer. This is a nice little square. I actually know which way my hotel is. Let's go this way. Favourite track. The favourite track that we used to go to and race at, I don't know, it's really tricky. It's going to sound a bit, but Silverstone for me, or Suzuka. Silverstone or Suzuka for me were two epic racetracks. Favourite era, this is also going to sound a bit, but it's also the truth. My favourite era is the one we're in right now, because the reality is that we can all look back and go, you know, the 70s were great, or the 80s were great, the 90s were great. They were all great in their own way, but I think right now is also absolutely brilliant. The technology is the finest and most complex it's ever been, the most advanced it's ever been, obviously. I just think every time we go through a new era, we're pushing new boundaries, we're unlocking new secrets. So for me, the one we're in right now is pretty epic. Right, let me try and find out where I'm staying for the next couple of days. So I've got to my hotel. I've also found the rest of my crew, the film crew, so that means we're all in the same place, which is good, all in the right place. And what a beautiful place it is. Lovely little town square just outside with the rolling mountains as a backdrop. That's pretty impressive. And look, now I really disagree heavily with bullfighting as a practice, but what you can't ever argue with is the beauty of the architecture of these arenas. Just to pick up on that question that I just answered from Small Egg, of course you didn't say what's your favourite specific F1 racetrack, so I've missed the greatest racetrack in the world. How can anyone argue it's not the Nordschleife, the old Nürburgring, unbelievable circuit. I've been lucky enough to drive it a few times and it is just an epic, almost seemingly endless roller coaster of twists and turns and banks and rises and falls, and just an amazing circuit. So there you go, my favourite track in the world, the Nordschleife. Right, it's just after 5:30 in the morning. We're getting up this early because, as you saw yesterday, the scenery around here is so beautiful. We're going to go and try and film the opening sequence for our little movie in front of the mountains with the sun coming up. So it should be amazing, but it does mean getting up pretty early. I've got to take a few different outfit choices with me because the client, who is BMW, get final say on what the look is like for these kind of things. So it feels a bit weird as a presenter. Someone else is standing there looking at you up and down, looking at what you're wearing, looking at how your hair is, and saying yes or no. It's a really strange concept. So you sort of get used to it after a while, but it's a really weird thing to have to experience in the beginning. Right, so it's now 6:30. We've driven up from the racetrack, which is the Ascari racetrack, which I can't really see at the moment. I've never been here before, but it's pitch black. Looks cool though, from what I can work out. But then from there, we've picked up the BMWs and we've driven up 10 minutes up into the mountains, which I think is going to be an amazing scene. I can't see a thing right now because the sun hasn't come up, but when it does, I think it's going to be spectacular. Anyway, let's get on to another question, because Dominus Maximus says, who will beat Mercedes first, Ferrari or Red Bull? And that's an interesting question, isn't it? Because on one hand, it's quite clear to say that right now Ferrari definitely seem like the closest, but they're not going to do it this year, and in fact they haven't done it this year. So who's going to be first? Could it be Red Bull? Could it be that in 2020 things take a reset? There are question marks over Ferrari's legality at the moment. You know, we'll get onto that I'm sure in a moment. But 2020 is the second year with Red Bull's partnership with Honda. They've still got Max Verstappen for 2020. Who's to say they couldn't take the step up and actually take the fight to Mercedes next year? So for me, that's a really close one to call, really difficult. I don't think it's as obvious as it might look now, with Ferrari being hot on their heels, if not even overtaking them. Right, they're all setting up back there, so I'm going to go and have a look. I've been outdone in the camera stakes.
Also der Sport wird natürlich regelmäßig kommen. Wäre quasi im Abo.
So we've done a morning so far, or half a morning I guess. Well, it feels like a full morning because we were up really early, but we've done a morning of shooting, gone really well. We've now had to stop because the racetrack behind me, which by the way is the Ascari racetrack here in Ronda in Spain. I've never been here before, so it's a new one for me. But there is a track day going on this morning, which first of all means we've had to move the cars from where they were right behind me, because that would be dangerous, but also the noise is now becoming slightly tricky with cars screaming around the track. So with all that going on, we're moving the cars, we're going to find a new location, and I'm going to answer another question. This one comes from Hamburglar. Hamburglar says, with the Ferrari power unit queries, can you explain the theories and what the gains may be? Appreciate that the engines might not be your area of expertise, but they're certainly not mine. Well, engines, are they my area of expertise? Probably not. What is? I don't know, I'm a jack of all trades. The answer to your question is what Ferrari, or what the theory is behind what Ferrari are doing. But don't forget, this is all speculation as far as the media are concerned. But the theory is that this comes back to the oil burning controversy that we've had in previous years. And what Ferrari have is an intercooler, which is what cools the charge air for the turbo. Now, that intercooler is cooled using oil. So the oil is cooled, it then cools the charge air and feeds that cooler air back into the engine. You know how a turbo works. But the theory behind this is that because you're not allowed to burn oil anymore, that was strictly clamped down on, there's a theory that Ferrari may have introduced a dedicated leak or a controlled leak in the system that just bleeds a little bit of oil into that charge air, for example, that might then be ingested into the engine. That oil, of course, contains energy, it helps the combustion process and will help to generate a bit more power. Now, that's massive speculation. We'll have to wait and see whether someone actually lodges an official complaint. But to do that, they've got to have pretty good grounds to do so. So we'll have to see. But hopefully, Hamburglar, that explains a little bit about what we think is going on. But as I say, total speculation at this point. So I guess this is what it's like to be a motorsports photographer. You kind of cramped down behind tyre barriers and safety barriers, trying to get snaps of the cars going by. We're going to have a go, see how hard can it be. By the way, while we're here, what do you think of the BMW, that's the X6M Competition version? I think it looks a bit mean, to be honest. That's the sort of thing I could do with for fitting the dogs and kids in the back, but also being able to go bloody quickly. Anyway, just on that subject of the Ferrari engine rumours, which is I guess all they are right now, another question on the same lines. Fergal Tierney says, what do you make of the claim by some teams over the legality of Ferrari's oil-burning engine setup? Is there truth to it, or are they just blowing blue smoke up their arses? What kind of boost would it give? So that's the part of the question I want to pick up on. What kind of boost would it give? Why would somebody be trying to potentially blow oil into the combustion chamber? And I have touched on this in a previous video, but it was a long time ago. So just very quickly, as I mentioned before, oil does contain energy. You know, oil is a fuel, as we all know. So it contains some energy. So if we can burn that in the combustion process, particularly when we're limited on how much fuel we can burn within the regulations, it's potentially a way of adding in a bit more energy or a bit more power to that combustion process. But the other thing that burning oil does is that it aids that combustion process itself. So it can aid with cooling and keeping combustion temperatures within the right window. It can prevent things like detonation, so you can run different ignition advancement without having detonation or without having knock. So there's a number of advantages to being able to spray. And when I talk about spraying oil, I'm not talking about chucking oil, I'm talking about oil vapor. So we're talking about tiny amounts, but if you can do that at the right moments, when you need that power boost, it can temporarily give you a boost in power. So that would be the reason that teams would do it. But I can't see any way that if that is what's happening, it couldn't possibly be illegal. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, as I say, but quite an interesting development. I love these kind of technical details. Teams will always push the boundaries, and obviously we don't want to see people cheating, but I do love to see people trying to exploit loopholes. That's what Formula One for me, or the technical side of Formula One, is all about. So we'll have to wait and see. Now, normally on these shoots, they're quite sort of reasonable high budget shoots, so we get really expensive catering facilities put in, whichever the studio is that we're using. But today, because we're out on location, pretty much in the middle of nowhere, our catering facilities is this. It's a bag full of bread and ham and cheese and crisps and fruit and all that sort of stuff, which is fine. It's absolutely lovely. I'm going to make myself a sandwich now. So it's not all glamour. Delightful. What an absolutely unbelievable scene behind me. Wow. Just wow. So we are now at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I haven't really been able to film much of my own stuff because I've been obviously filming the BMW stuff. But my goodness, what a day. This has got to go down as a dream job, and I'm sorry if I don't mean to rub anyone's nose in it, but I'm just, look at what is behind me. Check those views, and these roads, basically what I've been doing all day long is driving two of these, a 600 horsepower, one's an X5M and one's an X6M, driving them up and down just these most beautiful roads. The scenery here is just, I don't know, I've run out of words to describe it, but the roads are just these twisty roads running all the way up the top of the mountain. We're actually almost at the top now, having come all the way from the bottom, and it's just been a brilliant day. So I'm sorry rabbling on about it, but it's just been one of those awesome days at work which you got to just pinch yourself and feel incredibly lucky. So there you go, what a view. And these guys, the camera crew, have had to climb all the way down the mountain to get back to a location to film me driving past. So he climbed all the way back up. Bit of mountaineering going on as well. It's like watching a wildlife show with creatures coming out of the undergrowth. the lesser spotted sound man. Right, well, we're not quite done. We've still got more work to do, and we've come as high as you can get in the cars, because if you want to get up to that bit up there, wherever it is, up there, if you want to get up there, you've got to go by foot. You can't go any higher on the road. So it's been an incredible journey up this way, but I thought while we're up here and waiting while they're rigging the car for some in-car shots, I'll answer another question quickly. And this one, let me open my phone, comes from Richard Shirley, who says, "Hi Mark, wondering if F1 should make all Aero parts and the monocoque standard, and the only things that the teams can do, the only thing they can do with is engine upgrades, no Aero upgrades allowed." Right, I've mentioned this in previous videos if you remember, and whilst I don't think we should perhaps go quite that far, I think that's going too far for me, because I think the innovation in Formula 1 is a really important and interesting part of it, and a valuable part of it. I do think Aero shouldn't be part of that. And that might sound really weird coming from somebody with my background where it was all about aero development. But the reason I say that is that aero development in Formula 1, they spend hundreds of millions on it for parts that most viewers can't tell the difference between. And if you painted all the cars the same, I don't think even I could tell all of them apart and tell who's who. So for that much money and that much return, it seems silly to be using that much of our budget on aero development, on tiny little flick-ups and flaps. That's my opinion. However, I do think we should be putting that money that we're spending into other areas that could be more beneficial to, I don't know, to the wider world or to other industries. Things like software development or material science and engines and gearboxes and electric motors and the software that runs those and the power inverters. Those kind of areas are really beneficial to the future of not only the motor industry but the world at large. So why not? Let's restrict aero and move that development into other areas. But for me, it shouldn't just be aero, it shouldn't just be engines rather, and nothing else. It should be part of it, but there's loads of scope for the brilliant people in Formula 1 to develop a number of other areas that could be really great for the world at large. This car, by the way, albeit an SUV, is an absolute monster. Listen to this. Well, as we get a beautiful sunset over the beautiful backdrop behind me, we've pretty much finished today. I've got a little bit of VO to do, voiceover, to record inside the car where it's quiet, but that's pretty much it. I'm knackered, but what an epic, epic day it's been. Honestly, just brilliant. Long day. It is now 9:15. Obviously just got in. We was up at 5:30 or something this morning, so it's been a long day. Very quickly gonna dump my stuff, go and get something to eat at the restaurant upstairs, and then go to bed. Morning. It's early again. Still pitch black outside, but I've got about an hour until I go home back to the airport, so I'm going to try and squeeze in a run. Wow, it's quite hilly round here, so that was harder than I thought. Anyway, quickly, I'm going to answer a couple more questions. A couple of Formula E questions quickly. This one from Rich Payne, who says, how will the new manufacturers fare in Formula E? What will be the steepest learning curves for them? Two motorsport powerhouses, but a totally new discipline, especially for Porsche. Give us your thoughts, then give us Wilson's thoughts. Wilson's going to struggle because I'm not with him at the moment, but maybe I'll pass them on to you, Rich. Okay, so Formula E. The two new powerhouses that Rich is talking about, of course, are Mercedes and Porsche, who are joining the championship for the first time this year. And well, how are they going to fare? It's going to be tough for them. You know, everybody would, from the outside, would expect certainly somebody like Mercedes, with the dominance they've had in Formula 1, to come in and smash it out of the park. And I think that's not a realistic approach, not a realistic viewpoint. they are going to have a tough time in the beginning. Less so for Mercedes, because over the last year they've had the HWA Race Lab team running a lot of their personnel, equipment, even one of their drivers in Stoffel Vandoorne. So they have gained a season's worth of experience, but it wasn't necessarily running at the front. You know, they had a tough year. And so now they are a year ahead of Porsche, who are coming in for the very first time. They're going to have a tough year as well, because the biggest thing about Formula E is that everything you've learnt about motor racing prior to coming to this championship, I mean, it doesn't quite go out the window, but a lot of it does, because it's not just about getting around the racetrack as fast as you can. It's all about efficiency. I mean, the key word in Formula E is efficiency. So if you've got efficient technology that you've developed, then great. If you've got efficient software, if you've got predictive tools, simulation tools that can get the maximum efficiency out of your kit and the way you use it, if you've got the driver that has had some experience of driving this way, because it's a very different way of driving. And you saw, if you followed the testing, Stoffel Vandoorne, you know, the big gap between Stoffel Vandoorne and his teammate Nick de Vries. Now, that's not necessarily a gap in talent, that's just a gap in experience. And the new guys coming in are going to really have a tough time in getting to grips with that as quickly as possible. And it's no slight on any of those people, either the teams or their drivers, because even the guys that have come in, Jean-Eric Vergne, now a double champion, struggled in the beginning. He put it on pole on the very first day in his first race, but then just disappeared backwards in the race, because racing in Formula E is all about this being patient, it's about being efficient, it's about knowing when to use your energy, when to harvest energy. I mean, much more so than something like Formula One. So it is going to be a big learning curve, and I think both of those teams are going to find it tough for those reasons. There was one more Formula E question, which I'll just pick up on quickly, along a similar line. Korku Anoma says, based on what you've seen from the 2 days of testing so far, actually it's 3 days now, but he sent this a couple of days ago, who do you think is in the best position to have a good season, and who do you think needs a lot of work or has a lot of work to do? Well, as I said, the ones that have got the most work to do are the new guys, so those new teams and new drivers. The ones who are going to, you know, do best as it looks at the moment and would make perfect sense are the guys with all the experience. So the likes of Techeetah, the likes of Audi, the guys who've been perennial front runners, Virgin as well will also be strong. They've got so much experience now in this niche field of Formula E that's what gives them the biggest advantage. So I fully expect the same guys to be at the front, and perhaps over the course of this year we'll start to see the new guys start to creep their way forward, start to understand it more, and the field close up. And that's saying something, because the field is already incredibly close. Nothing in the testing times amongst the whole field, so a small gain could take you a long way up the tables. Right, I've got to have a shower and then I've got to go. Right, back home. Obviously, I got home on Saturday afternoon. It's now Monday morning, but on Saturday afternoon I got home just in time to go out and celebrate my wife's birthday with her on Saturday night. That was wicked. That continued on through yesterday as well, so that was a great weekend. I hope you've all had a good weekend by now as well. So today the video's going up. I hope you've enjoyed the video so far, and appreciate you all for sticking with me. I just want to wrap it up with two final questions before we go. First of all, Jocelyn Sundin says, as a mechanic, when you heard that your driver had had a crash, which part of the car is easier or harder to fix? For example, in quali, the back, the front, sideways, etc. We always play at mechanic and say, oh, it's a quick fix. So first of all, when you see that on the garage monitors, when you're inside the garage as a team mechanic and your driver puts it in the wall, it's the most incredible sinking feeling, obviously. Which is easier to fix? What we typically had and have is a complete built-up rear end as a spare. So if you damaged a rear corner, for example, went in backwards, what you can do is you can unbolt the gearbox with rear suspension and rear wing, wheel it away from the car, and then wheel in a kind of brand new one, a replacement. Obviously you've got penalties and stuff to take with gearboxes, so it's never as simple as that. But because we had the spares and the ability to build something up as a complete unit, you could just wheel in a spare rear end. So that, I guess, in that sense makes that bit a bit easier. And also, I was a front ender most of my time at Formula One, so I always like to think that was the more complicated bit. So front end was always, you know, you could build up so much in terms of your spares and have some spare sub-assemblies built up, but never, you can't just put a new front end on the car because it's all connected to the chassis. So I would say the easier end, if you like, if you want to call it that, but there's no real such thing. It's all just an absolute nightmare, particularly if it happens at the wrong time, and it's a case of all hands on deck to make sure you get the car ready. But that's what Formula One mechanics are incredibly good at. That's why they do their job, because they can deal with things under pressure incredibly quickly and get the job done. Right, final question then for this week is from Stephen Chan, who says, "Hi Mark, do you think that teams will change their aero concept from inward to outward or vice versa for 2020? Beginning of 2019, experts said that Ferrari's concept was a dead end, but they're the fastest on 1 lap speed and even on non-high speed tracks. Best wishes, Stephen." Thanks, Stephen. So what he's talking about, I think, is the front wing concepts. Remember, there were 2 main camps, weren't there? And it's not strictly true to say that one is in-wash and one is out-wash as a concept. But what you're talking about is where the downforce is created. So is it created on the inboard part of the front wing, like, for example, the Ferraris, the Alfa Romeos, Renaults? Is it created within the main part of the front wing flaps, the outer sections, like a Red Bull, like a Mercedes, for example? Are teams likely to switch those for next year? No. And the reason it's a no is because 2020 is the final year with the current aero regs that we have before we go into a massive change for 2021. So to start developing something brand new or a massive departure from where you are for next year doesn't really make any sense. It's much more going to be about fine-tuning the concept you have, taking what you've learnt this year, because everything that's developed through 2019 can be, you know, those learnings can be useful for next year because of a stable set of regulations. And Mercedes is a really good example of this, because their platform, they're one of the last teams now to not have this high rake platform, aren't they? Which actually is the better way to go. The high rake concept has more potential for downforce creation, yet Mercedes have stuck with their lower, flatter platform and made it work. And you can argue, well, they've got the quickest car, they've been the most successful. Absolutely. I think even they accept that if they really wanted to, they might be able to extract more from a high rake concept. But there's no point at this stage in them changing and changing philosophy. 2021 is a massive change, such a huge change, huge departure from where everybody is right now, that 2020 is going to be about getting through it. Very early on, development is going to start switching to the following season's car because it's so new. And so the development through 2019, and even now, teams bringing new parts of the car because they're relevant for next year, that's going to continue over the winter. And then at some point, reasonably early next year, huge amount of resources are going to switch over to 2021, and that's where all the focus will be. So I don't see big changes between this year's concept and next year's concepts for anybody. I think it's much more about using what they've learnt this year to get the absolute best out of it, to maximise what they have for that interim year of 2020. Right, that's it. Thank you so much, guys, for all the questions. I know I didn't get through as many this week. Let me know what you thought of this type of vlog. It was an interesting one for me because obviously I had that great trip. But I appreciate there was a lot of, I don't know, was it fluff in this video? Or did you find it interesting going behind the scenes on that shoot with BMW? Did you like the travel vlog style of it as well? I enjoy making those kind of things. Of course, it was what I was doing every single day until fairly recently. So it was nice to get back to that for a change, but dropping in the questions as well was really interesting. So let me know what you thought of it. I will only do that, of course, when we've got something interesting to show. So otherwise, we might go back to just a standard smashing through the questions. Either way, keep them coming. I really appreciate it. And I'll catch you soon. In fact, Thursday for the Mexican Grand Prix preview. Ta-ra, folks.